What's going on, everybody? VitalSyntax here, and today I'm going to be doing a comparison between two very popular games that have kind of arose over the past couple months, and it's going to be between the DayZ and DayZ. Now, I'm not going to be disputing which one is overall better. I think it's going to ultimately come down to personal preference, depending on what things you like about one or what things you like about another. But I will give you my personal opinion towards the end on which one I think will be a better. Now, I'm not comparing the DayZ mod to DayZ. I am comparing the standalone version of DayZ, which is going to be out before the end of the year, to the version or the DayZ, which is also going to be out before the end of the year. And you know, they're probably going to have a very, very similar release window. And I know a lot of people don't like to compare games, even in general when it comes to comparing things like Battlefield versus Call of Duty. People say you can't compare it. I would strongly disagree and say you can compare it, and comparisons are very helpful for people that can't buy both games. So that's kind of what I'm coming down to is it's more of a comparison, not necessarily which one's the best, but which one is better for you. Maybe that's the one you should buy. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. There's a couple different categories that I wanted to put this into, and also I want to start by saying that I'm going to leave my personal preference towards the end, and also I'm trying to be as unfavoritive to one or the other, just so that it's kind of more of a fair approach. So let's first talk about graphics. Now, both games are still under development, and both games are going to see a lot of improvements from their current state right now to their final builds that are going to be released before the end of the year. So it's kind of hard to compare this along with all the rest of the content that we're going to see, because we don't know exactly what we're going to be seeing, but we have a general idea. As a whole, DayZ runs, or I'm going to call it DayZ Standalone just so it doesn't get confused with the mod. DayZ Standalone runs off of a similar engine to Arma 2, which is called the Virtual Reality, or sorry, it's Real Virtuality. Sorry, I just get it mixed up. Real Virtuality game engine. Whereas the DayZ runs off of, I believe, something called Eclipse, which they have licensed, and it's also run other games like The War Inc. Okay, so DayZ has a basis in a military simulator. That's what Arma 2 is. And just like we saw in the mod, in the standalone version, a lot of the graphics are going to be similar. They're using the same map, but it's a modified version of the map that has a lot of new content, a lot of new areas to explore. But for the most part, the map and the graphics are going to be somewhat similar to what we saw in the mod for Arma 2. And overall, the graphics for Arma 2, especially for that map, you have a very, very far view distance. That's definitely a huge advantage. There's an emphasis on realism. It does have quite poor performance, especially with the mod, but that is something that they're working on very, very diligently. And I bet it's going to have much, much better performance when the standalone comes out. Just keep that in mind. There's a high object count, especially with the vegetation. There's a ton of trees, very, very dense forests. You know, decent textures. There's no real issues with the textures, especially when you turn them up. You have lots of different options. The lighting is pretty decent. There are some post-processing effects that make it look a little bit better. It's not the best lighting. It's just in general not the best graphics, but they're pretty decent. And most importantly, they're very realistic, and they have a lot of emphasis on realism. And then also the animations are all motion captured, and they're doing a ton of new animations that are all motion capped for the standalone version. So the animations in general are very, very well done. All right, so let's move over to the graphics of the DayZ. Overall, the look and feel of them is more, instead of realism or simulator based like DayZ, it's more mainstream. It's more something that you would see in like Call of Duty. And the graphics, they have decent lighting effects, decent textures. There are some low textures that I notice, especially in the videos right now. Hopefully those textures will be increased in resolution. Things like grass and vegetation and stuff like that look pretty low, to be honest. There's also a lower object count as far as vegetation goes, especially you'll see in the forest and stuff. The trees are huge. They're like massive trees. And I know it's based in Colorado. And also because they're very large trees, there's fewer of them. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm just pointing it out. There's also some very clunky handmade animations that are not motion captured, and they're very obvious. Those might be changed when the full game comes out. Once again, the game isn't even out in alpha yet. The alpha starts on Monday. So there are some animations, especially, I think the animations are the biggest issue for me. So overall, I'm going to say that the graphics, I'm going to say it's a tie. And the main reason is, DayZ has a very big emphasis on realism, but it has really bad performance right now. And then DayZ is kind of, I guess, has a lot of animation issues. So right now I would give it a tie, but once both games are released, my predictions is that in general I think DayZ will have a slightly improved graphics, especially on the animation side of things, unless DayZ, actually starts doing some motion capturing. I don't know if they're planning to do that, but I've heard a lot of their animations and seen a lot of their animations, and I know that they are. A lot of them are either hand-drawn or hand-created, or which are, sometimes they look great, but usually they look very clunky and unnatural. And a lot of them are also borrowed from the previous game that was running on that game engine, the War Inc. Or sorry, I think maybe it's just War Inc. But anyway, let's go on to the next section, which is gameplay, which is the most important part, I believe, of any game. So let's start with DayZ. The emphasis of the player versus, or of the gameplay, is player versus player combat, and in my opinion, it's one of the best gameplay experiences out of any game I've played ever. The multiplayer at least component. It is so intense, so heart pounding, and if you actually get up to like a higher level of DayZ, it is just one of the most intense games, and it's one of the only games that I'm willing to sit in one location and kind of almost in fear of moving, because I think a sniper's on me, or I'm maybe tracking somebody or something like that, and I'll literally just like not move at all for like 2 hours, and I still have a blast. It's weird. In any other game that would just be the worst experience ever, but DayZ has mastered this new type of gameplay that is based off of you only having one life. Well, not necessarily only having one life, you can always restart, but losing all your gear when you die. And it really is a nice change of pace from, modern shooter games where you respawn every 2 seconds. Now, it also has a really good gun mechanic because it comes from Armor, and it has probably one of the best military simulating level of gun mechanics. And a lot of different control you have over the gun. There's, bullet drop, there's travel time, there's, real ballistics, there's different damages for different weapons, there's just in general, the gun mechanics are very well done and very realistic, very simulator-esque. Now let's move over to the DayZ. So the DayZ is more mainstream. It reminds me more of Call of Duty type of gameplay, but they're still trying to basically emulate what DayZ did. Now the DayZ claims to be in development before DayZ was announced, and that might be the case. But it's obvious, and they have admitted, if you don't believe me, I can probably put a link in the description to one where on the forums they admitted that they had, not necessarily admitted, but had said that they changed their design process because of the success of DayZ, and they copied a lot of ideas from DayZ. And it's very apparent. It doesn't matter if they started first or not. So hopefully, and I haven't played it yet, once again, that's kind of a big undecided factor about this comparison, which maybe I should wait and do later, but I'll probably do another one once I've played them both, is that we haven't played DayZ. But from the looks of things, they're very, very similar in actual core gameplay, and they're kind of trying to emulate DayZ, and hopefully by the end of the alpha and beta, once they get feedback, they can do that pretty well. So overall, I'm going to say that DayZ is the winner here just because it's their original idea of this whole zombie apocalypse, one life, player versus player driven environment. DayZ is bringing some new things like the safe zones and stuff, but they're also missing a lot of the core mechanics of DayZ that are incorporated with ARM engine, like the damage modifiers, like bleeding, like breaking bones, like getting the shakes and all that type of stuff. And they're introducing a lot of more things with the standalone version, like diseases that spread through contact with other players, stuff like that. So overall, I'm going to give the gameplay a plus as far as DayZ goes. Next, let's compare prices, because that's a big component when it comes to people that can't buy both games. And right now, DayZ doesn't really have an official price, but it's been rumored it's going to be between $15 and $30, so probably somewhere in there. And the DayZ has a reduced price right now. If you purchase it during the beta, it costs $20 for the cheapest package and $60 for the most expensive package. Now, keep in mind that the most expensive version also includes like a server that you can host. And then it also includes in-game currency, so there's really no need to buy that unless you were going to buy that stuff anyway. So essentially the game is $20 right now, but once the beta is over, it's going to go up to $30. Now, as far as expanding the game and adding new content, which is another big part of DayZ, because after you get used to the map, after you get to a certain point, you don't want to just keep playing that map over and over. You don't want to just keep doing the same thing over and over. So having new types of weapons or new maps, new content basically to play, I think is a huge component of making the life cycle of this game last longer. So for example, in DayZ, there's been a lot of community support by adding a bunch of new maps, like Lingor Island and things like that. There's a couple, I think there's like 5 or 6 of them that you can play now. So that's kind of community driven. I don't know if it's going to work the same way once the standalone comes out, but I would hope there is some type of way for the community to put new content into the game. As far as WarZ goes, there's no modding tools. There's nothing like that. So it's all going to be content that's released by Hammerpoint Interactive, the people who are developing the game. But they've claimed that they're going to be releasing new maps, new weapons, new content in general that's going to be free for anybody that purchased the game. Now, this is kind of an empty promise as it sits right now. We don't really know exactly how much content they're going to give us and if they're going to give it to us for free. I mean, they've claimed that it's going to be free, but we'll have to wait and see. But in the best case scenario, we'll get some, new maps. They've talked about, much larger maps than the one that they're releasing, which is, I believe, 165 square kilometers or something like that. But anyway, that's just my comparison between DayZ and WarZ as far as the factual parts about it, like graphics and gameplay and stuff like that. Now, my personal opinion on it is that both of these games are slightly different. They do share a lot of the same mechanics. And as far as if I was to choose one, I would personally probably get DayZ. Partly is that because I have a lot more experience. That might change. The beta is the alpha is starting on Monday, and I'll actually be able to get my hands on it. Unfortunately, I can't upload any videos until the 30th. Or maybe even later in November. They do have some type of an NDA where I can't upload videos, but I can probably talk about it, but maybe not. I don't know. I'll probably read into the details on that a little bit more. But as it sits right now, I think DayZ is going to be a more solid experience, a more full experience, and also kind of the original experience. At the same time, I think WarZ is going to offer a little bit more mainstream version of the game. They have a non-hardcore version if you don't want to lose all your loot. They have a normal version that just locks your character out when you die instead of you losing everything. But I do think that the WarZ is going to be a great game. I think it's going to be very exciting. I already purchased it, so I'm definitely going to be playing it quite a bit. And if you can, and you're really interested in this genre of gaming, the open world survival PvP driven games, then I would suggest getting both of them. But if you're down to just one and you want to take my opinion on it, I would just go for DayZ. Although your best bet, you don't have to buy the game right now, so your best bet is to wait till WarZ is released in its entirety and DayZ is released in its entirety, and I'll make sure to do update videos once we get more content and once we get more information about these two games. But anyway, thanks for watching. If you guys enjoyed the video, feel free to give me a like or a favorite, or leave your comments down below with your opinions on which one is better, DayZ or WarZ. I would like to stay away from just blatant claims that would kind of start a flame war, but if you have a compelling, reasonable explanation why you like one game over the other, then feel free to leave it in the comments. I'm definitely interested in what you guys have to say. And remember to subscribe if you want to be auto-notified when I upload the next video. See you guys later.